Hey, Ghost Machine fans, this one's for you. Welcome to the Ghost Machine Fans Podcast, episode 25. We are back with another deep dive, and this time it's all about the world of Rook Exodus. I am Nick, and as usual, I'm joined by my better half, Snoggle. Snoggle, did you ever imagine we would make it this far?
Absolutely. We are persistent.
Resilient.
One would say unstoppable. We will never surrender.
Even if we were thrown into a large body of water, I'm sure that a domesticated animal friend would come to our rescue so that we could endure.
Maybe we could also say we're on fire.
And so much so that we feel the need to take the plunge. Either into a waterfall or perhaps a leap of faith that empowers us with a new mindset about the planet.
We're flying with these puns.
And that's because we are talking about Rook Exodus number 5, which we're excited to be back for another deep dive on. The last episode was a creator interview, and the episode before that was our first character spotlight. So we're a couple of weeks behind when this issue came out, but you should have had plenty of time to run out and grab it so that you can talk about it with us today. This episode is going to air on September 18th. We do have a shout out as usual. This time it's going out to someone on the Instagram page. It's going to King Alfred NFT. That's King like the monarch, Alfred like Batman's butler, NFT like those things on the internet that I still don't understand. And King Alfred has recently created some super cool Rook Exodus reels with some neat fire and other special effects that were on them. And he was kind enough to collaborate with Ghost Machine fans on Instagram with those. So we give you a shout out, sir. Thank you so much for sharing your creativity with us. We love it when Ghost Machine fan created content comes to our attention, because every time we will make sure to share it. And I believe that Snoggle is in the newsroom.
I am in the newsroom. Pretty exciting. CGC exclusive signing announced for Francis Manifold, Peter Snoggle.
That sounds like what that YouTube thing that you looked up for that guy's name said, yeah.
Close enough. And then we have Peter Tomasi, Brad Anderson, Evan Rice, Jason Fabach, Gary Frank, Brian Hitch, and Jeff Johns.
Yeah, it's very exciting. So this is a CGC Ghost Machine exclusive signing event. Do you know what that means, Snoggle?
No, I don't, but I heard that there's a deadline of some sort.
Yeah, there is a deadline. So here's the thing. Ghost Machine's bringing in a lot of new comic book readers, and that means a lot of new comic book collectors. And if you've seen any of the videos that we put on Instagram, it's rather apparent that we keep a lot of the slabbed books in this house. So when somebody says that, they're referring to a book that's been encapsulated by a company like CGC, or sometimes there's a couple of other ones. I think one's called CBCS. And the book goes in there and they grade the book. It protects the book. It makes it easy to display the book and all that cool stuff. So normally you can just send your books in the mail to these people and they'll do that. But what they're doing with this is they're saying, hey, we're going to do a Ghost Machine specific deal where if you send us your books and they arrive to us at our office by the 4th of October, Ghost Machine's going to be signing all these books. You basically prepay for something you otherwise would have to go to a convention and wait in line to do. And the other aspect of that is there are verified books and then there are witnessed signatures. And so if you were at a convention and you wanted CGC to witness your signature, you'd have to go get them, bring them over to the artist. They would literally watch it happen. Then you'd go back after it happened and you'd give them the book to go grade after they verified, visually witnessed that it was signed. They have another one where if your book is pre-signed, you can get it verified, but people tend to like the witness one a little bit. It's cooler. And so in this case, also, there is a CGC custom Ghost Machine label that's going to be on each of the books that's graded, and that's pretty neat then when they do that. So it's a really great opportunity to get your books signed, which increases their value and makes them cooler. And by value, we don't necessarily mean the dollar value. That I understand that's not necessarily the case for everybody, but it's awesome if you're like us and like getting to a convention is nigh impossible because of our super busy schedules and stuff. It's just a great way to make your Ghost Machine collection that much cooler.
Where is this happening?
Well, you don't have to be there. That's the point. Like you're not. That's the point.
Amazing.
Well, because you mail the comics to the company.
Mm-hmm.
And in our listener mail, there is a question that asks some more in detail about like how you do that and like about whether or not it's a good idea. And we'll talk more about that when we answer that question.
Okay.
I'm going to hijack this newsroom from you. And that is that this very book, which we are deep diving into today, has actually been already put out for a second printing because of how quickly it sold. And this is an interesting thing because Rook 5 was actually put out for second print before Rook 4. So something made Rook 5 sell so much so quickly that it outpaced the fourth book, and the second printing of the fifth one is gonna be released before the second printing of the fourth one. Yeah, so it's neat. I think it's this cover that really did it, but we'll talk about that cover here in just a second. But we don't want to go too fast. If this is your first time here, you may not know that you are at risk of spoilage, and we just won't let that happen, will we, Snoggle?
Yeah, cue the noise.
That is a good one, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So that pause is to indicate what?
You gotta stop, because we are about to deep dive into every page, every panel. The spoilers will be spoiled consistently. If you have not read this book, you need to go to your local comic book store quickly, come home, read it, and we will be waiting for you so we can dive into it together.
Absolutely. I'll tell you, to prep for this episode, even though I've had copies of this, I didn't have one available, and I'd like take the picture of the thing that we're going to post about it ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
I had to go to a different comic book store than I usually go to, because my usual comic book store is a true comic book store that is closed on Mondays. So I had to go to another one that was more like a game store. And the game store had like 4 copies of this still. You know, it had a bunch of it, and this one's been out for a little while. And they told me they had ordered enough to have the ratio variants. So that means they've sold a ton of them.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Nice.
Yep. So run out there, support your local comic book shop, and then come on back. We will wait for you. We will be ready to talk about Rook number 5 with you.
Every time we say number 5, I just think of Mambo number 5.
What's that?
The song?
Oh, how's that?
A little bit of na-na-na-na-na.
I think that's like the background music that would be appropriate for this. Don't you think?
I guess.
So, you know, we have 2 covers to talk about. So you got your Mambo first one. I don't know if that would be appropriate for
a
the
little
primary.
bit of swine saving my life. My bad.
So we do have 2 covers, and I feel like the A cover of this book may have been the reason that it sold out so quickly, because it is a mind-blowing cover. But tell us, you know, about these covers. Both of them are done by the same person, and kind of in the similar fashion of what we've seen so far. What did you think of that primary cover, though? I think I even remember you said something to me as soon as you looked at it.
Both were by Jason Fabok, correct?
Yeah, so far that's what's been going on with most of these.
So, cover A is Scarecrow Rook. And, I mean, it just looks sweet. See, he's in a field. He's clearly on fire, and the crows are getting him. It's very creepy. I mean, there's a red sun and or moon behind him. Who's to say? It's just really well done. It's neat.
Yeah, I think it really does justice to Jason's art style.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to point out, it does, for anybody who's been reading the whole series, it reminds you of when he remembered as a young person, not in this issue, but in previous issues, when he remembered as a young person that he had a scarecrow in his fields as a child. So even if you had, like we hadn't, if we'd only seen the cover and we hadn't read the inside of this book, then we would still be recollecting that parallel, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what's also interesting, having read it and reflecting on what I've read, is that the crows on the cover, at first, in the comic, eventually they assist him. The crows on the cover, they appear to be taking bits of him apart. So yeah.
I have an interesting take on this. And I understand that we're just at the cover. So I feel like a scarecrow is meant to scare the creatures away from the crops. And as you read through it, Rook was pushing his crows away. He was really the one who wasn't letting them in. So maybe this is them just like pecking at him to just get a piece of who he is as a person. Maybe there's some more symbolism to it.
That's some deep crow stuff right there. I wasn't making fun. That's pretty cool. That's pretty good. How about the B cover? The B cover
is sweet.
It's another profile cover. This one, if you recall, Ghost Machine fans, number 2 was Rook, number 3 was Direwolf, number 4 was Ursa, and this one is Swine.
So, I'm going to ask a question. Is this going to come in like a shiny foil version?
Yeah, so the one that we're talking about is just the standard one, but so far, issues 2, 3, and 4, like I said, have all had 1 for 50 retailer incentive variants. So that means the retailers got to order 50 and they get one of those. This time, for some reason, this number 5 issue, the ratio was a 1 for 100. It is cool, though, because there hasn't been a 1 for 100 ratio variant since Rook number 1, when there were like a bunch of them, a bunch of different ratios.
Makes it very hard to get.
It does. It makes it harder to get because the presumption typically is that the farther a series goes along, the fewer are ordered because people tend to buy like number 1 and number 2 because they get excited. And so usually when there are ratio variants at later issues, they are indeed harder to get. Or like especially ratio variants of second printings and stuff like that. Either way, there is a foil one. It's super cool like all the others. And I'm sure I know of multiple people that collect those specifically because they want to, once they're done, they want to put them all up on the wall. They look sweet.
Yeah, that sounds like really an awesome way to display these books.
So we have to do a little creator roll call, and then we'll jump right into this deep dive. You've already pretty clearly pointed out this was drawn by Jason Fabak. Who wrote this joint?
Our creators were Jeff Johns and Jason Fabak. Our colorist was Brad Anderson. Rob Lee, our king of letters, he is back. And then our editor-in-chief, Brian Cunningham, and Steve Blackwell was the designer on the book.
The usual suspects.
Yes.
As it were. And you just reminded me of something that I wanted to let people know about when you mentioned our king of letters. You may or may not be aware, Ghost Machine fans, but Mr. Rob Lee has a secondary Instagram called Rob Lee Outdoors. It's just his name and then the word outdoors. It's all one word. And he has a side hobby. He's a naturalist and an outdoorsman, as we've discussed in previous episodes once with him. And he puts these really cool photos on there that are like next level. Like he's got one of this great blue heron grabbing a water snake and stuff like that. So if you dig that kind of thing, like he goes kayaking all over the place and finds these amazing photos. So take a gander at that. As we alluded to in our eclectic introduction, we left off with Rook taking the plunge, right? Like if you recall, there was a big battle. They were at the wildlife grid. They were trying to make sure that Ursa didn't get the grid because we have found out that the grid is a literal object that can be picked up and moved and reconnected at a different place or something like that. And so Ursa, it seemed, succeeded in the mission, got the grid, and then Rook and he were battling. He got Rook's helmet off. Rook got a hold of the helmet, but then in the process got knocked off this massive waterfall that you've seen in previous issues where there's the oasis, there's a waterfall going over a dam. And that's where we were left.
Yeah.
And I would just like to help everyone recall that at that point when we left off, I specifically stated that I would wager that Pumbaa will pull him out of the water like Aragorn's horse in Lord of the Rings.
And that is what happened. I like how the first two panels here, we've got just like everything is pitch black. So whether this is just like him kind of like knocked out and thinking as he's knocked out, he obviously thinks that he drowned. He goes for this, fight or flight. I got thrown off the cliff. Oh no, my birds went away from me. I like how he says it's every living thing's core instinct of survival. Face danger or run away from it. It's also my eternal struggle with the birds. So at the beginning of the book, he is still like, these birds just always want to, fly away. The birds are just flight. And he thinks he drowned. At least I thought I did. You hear a cool little sound. I don't know what that is, but
Well, let's talk about this sound. But right before he says, at least I thought I did, there's two... He's kind of internally reflecting on what's going on, when he's not sure if he drowned or not. These two thought squares, because they're not bubbles, are pretty significant in that I'm going to emphasize a few words for you. I'm going to read them, but I'm going to emphasize specific words for you. While I fell into the raging river below, swallowed up by the angry artificial waters of a synthetic world I once believed to be my second chance, battered by the simulated waves and pulled under by the programmed current, I drowned. Those are specific words that continue to emphasize and echo artificiality. Okay? And what it's doing is it's saying, hey, this character is making a transition from one thing to another, is how I read it, because it starts out with the technology piece being basically a damning thing for him. And in the end, we see that flip. So that seemed really specific to me. So he hears this snorting noise. But then the sound you heard is like this SNRKK. And that reminds me of other noises that have come out of creatures like this in the past. But then what shocking thing occurs?
I love how the first thing he sees is Pumbaa. And I really, really like how this was drawn where the top part is kind of fuzzy. And there's more, you can see that he's starting to regain focus. And also like the thought bubble, like, hello. That's how I picture the voices.
So you're saying that he sees this blurry, his eyes open, it's a little blurry, which is a really cool way of showing that his eyes are opening, plus the edge of the panels are both kind of blackened. And then you see Pumbaa, and it's like it's like ... and then the bubble, but it's kind of weirdly shaped. To me, that means it's almost like telepathic communication or something of that nature. Like he can hear the animal, but it was like a hello to me as well. I don't know why I thought that was the Pumbaa voice within Pumbaa's mind that Rook can hear. Yeah, I guess that would be what it was. He is quite alarmed by it, and then you do get a pretty neat full-on single splash page that shows, it does emphasize...
Very beautiful, by the way.
Yeah.
Don't worry, Rook. It's only me, Pumbaa. That's how I read it in my brain.
And this is another place where we have come to learn that Ghost Machine really likes to shamelessly have little plugs that reference different things.
Oh, which is...
And I'm cool with that. It's like...
Me as well.
Pop culture references or whatever you want to call them. Like, it doesn't bother me at all.
It's an homage.
Yeah.
I also think that even in one singular page, you can just see some very caring nature in this giant boar. Like, look at those eyes. Oh.
Yeah, for sure.
Can we adopt a boar?
Nope. But so he can hear him, and what's interesting is as soon as Rook is like, no, yeah, this is nuts, like you can tell, like whatever is going on in this moment, whether it's a vision or it really is a thing or whatever it is, he's a little delirious, but he does say, like, you can't talk, and Pumbaa really, like, actually rebuts him, and still, these are thought bubbly looking things from Pumbaa.
I like how Pumbaa, his first thing is like, you should thank me for saving your life in return instead of telling me what I can't do.
Every other animal is always trying to do that. It's kind of...
Like, I pulled you from the river, buddy. I saved you. I saved the helmets. And then, oh, he missed the swine.
There are certain storytelling mechanisms here that help us get a sense of whether or not this is really going on, right? Because he's having this conversation. He thinks something's wrong. He says, I hit my head. Pigs don't talk. Then the quote-unquote conversation continues because he's like, I'm not a pig. I'm a boar, etc.
But you see how his vision's still fuzzy, too? In
when
the
he
two
looks
panels, when we know that he's the person looking at the pig.
That's usually... Yeah, you're right. So when he's talking at the top and we can see both of them in the panel, it's not fuzzy. Mm-hmm. But when he's looking at him, it's fuzzy. So it's still implied... I mean, to this, we don't truly know.
Yeah, no matter what, he's out of it. But then he better get into it. Now, something I have to say, so we turn the page, and it's like, calamity!
Because we hear the forest starting to crack again, and planes.
Uh-oh. Question for you, Nick. Has Rook's, shoulder pads and his little spiky arm things always been that orangish red?
You're asking because you're wondering if they're reflecting off the fire more. Right?
Yes.
I think it's because there's fire. So the reason I know they've always been red, and I think in these panels they're brighter because of the reflection of the fire, is because when I attempted to make a Rook Exodus video in the wee hours of the night one night, using LARP gear and borrowed things from random places, I had a red pauldron that I put on the same shoulder as that. And I was like, oh man, I don't have any spikes, but we did what we did. And then I noticed only one of his bracers has it. It's just his right bracer, not his left. His left is just kind of like a wrapping. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I know what you mean. I think in this part especially, Brad does a pretty amazing job of showing what glows differently and stuff in firelight.
No, that's cool. And obviously, so the bear is trying to burn them out of the woods. And I find it interesting that even though his helmet's not on, his crows are still nearby.
They are still nearby, and he does look up and see them after they make a note that the bear is trying to burn us out. That's what Pumbaa says. But, and he notices the birds. He sees them up in the air making the noises that the birds always make. We got KAWs all over. And then he's grabbing his helmet, and he's like, the birds will save us once I command them to. And you can see there's really an emphasis there, I feel like, in the writing of saying, hey, P.S., this character, he still is of the mind that he has to treat these animals a certain way. And it's not the same as what it is going to be by the last page of this issue. And he just puts this thing on, and it just, it's a whole nother thing.
It looks amazing, by the way, when it's the connections established. And I think, when it says Corvidae connection established, each little connection that's established is to each individual crow, but then it's unstable and then it's terminated. I mean, it's just like calamity. And he's like, no, there's fire everywhere. Which brings us to, again, wow, it just looks so cool how the color changes and he is basically reliving a memory on his old farm.
What's cool is it's like this event with the helmet helped push him to that, essentially. And the narrative is saying, normally he puts his helmet on and it's like, I'm going to deal with the birds again. But he puts his helmet on this time and it's painful and freak out and, like you said, unstable, then it's terminated. And that leads his mind in this moment where we don't know if what he's seeing is real or not already because it's talking to Pumbaa. Leads his mind to recollect this scene that we immediately remember from the first issue or very early on in the story when we learned about his origin, about his father being a farmer on Earth, and then the farm burned down, and then he had to leave or he left because he got the insurance claim, essentially, or whatever.
Yeah. Well, you think, like, so something that I think is interesting here, because this is definitely happening in his head, but I kind of feel like the birds have infiltrated his psyche. And they're like, they put him up like a scarecrow, so he has to face what actually happened.
This is a point of contention, I think, is going to be for a lot of people. Because so this is still a vision. It's still he thinks it's a memory, but the difference is within the vision of, the living memory, for all intents and purposes, the crows, like a big bunch of them, grab him, put him on like a pole, and he's up there like a scarecrow. It's very much just the same situation as in the cover A, right? And so he gets put up there, and it's like to me, there's even one of them that goes right in front of his face and gives him one real solid caw, and then he says, "Get away." And there's a transition happening here.
Which I do believe is a symbolism of who he was, but, like, he doesn't really want to let them in on his feelings, on who he is, so he's like, get away. Right. He's pushing them away from his true self and past.
Yeah. And so it's, we know this is just a vision. We don't know if he's still, like, in that burning woods back there, or if really this whole time he's just knocked out. But this shifts, right? Because he falls, there's a fire, the fire goes, then he falls off looks like he's pulling on his bindings, and he breaks them, and then he falls off of the scarecrow post deal. And then he looks up, and he sees his dad. And his dad says, the whole world is dying. What else is there to do? And he's got a gas can, and he's pouring the gas around the farm and burning it down, the presumption being that he knew if he did that his son would get the insurance and he'd be able to leave the earth. Because if I recall correctly, like the big evil corporate, whatever, that was their thing back in earlier issues.
And now Pumbaa's back.
Now Pumbaa is back, so we know Pumbaa's like in the vision-ish, yeah, like Pumbaa's actually like in this vision of his memory. He even speaks to him about it.
Yeah, he chose flight instead of fight. Just like the birds, huh? And just like you. And then he's like, tells Rook to watch out, and then all of a sudden we're back in the forest again.
So here, it's important that we talk about this for a moment, because you said that you believe that is the real memory. And that basically what that means psychologically is he saw that happen, he blocked it out, and he's been kidding himself this whole time, living, whatever, delusions of grandeur or whatever.
It could also be what he thinks really happened, or what everyone else said happened. I mean, we won't know, right?
If it is a real memory, and he intentionally, like, didn't remember it that way, all of these events throughout this issue indicate a transition for a person, like a transition for a being somehow. Like somebody that's going through some sort of realization and a moment of acceptance and then becoming something different. And I would argue more in this case as a result. I know that's a little cryptic, but like you can't really see it until the last couple of pages, like when he's really like, okay, this is a different person. So, Pumbaa the Dreamweaver. It's just funny. Remember our friend Comic Book Chronicles Rob that we've talked about? Yeah. He did one of his funny videos about this issue, and his whole thing was about how Pumbaa was from The Lion King, and how he basically ended up hearing Rook's voice as Nathan Lane. When I was a young warden. Anyways, I thought it was a funny video. So they're back on Exodus. Like, he seems like he's gotten the reality check-ish, right? And he's talking to Pumbaa, and they're running through the flaming forest again. And then we get some really great insight about if Pumbaa can really talk, then really great insight about how a warden can and can't connect with their drift, because Pumbaa mentioned that Swine was a good warden because he shared himself, he let us feel his fears with him. Pumbaa's still talking to him. They're running through this flaming forest, and you start to have crows in the distance, but he points out that, like, Swine was a different type of warden. He shared himself with us, his fears, and he was afraid he'd never belong anywhere or with anyone else. If it's part of this weird delusion that Rook has where he thinks that Pumbaa can talk, that means that it's facilitating whatever is about to happen in his mind as to what he really thinks he needs to do to change. And what he's saying is, if that's a delusion, he's saying to himself, I need to share myself with these creatures. I need to become like Swine was. And then, something different happens.
Yeah. And I mean, Pumbaa really does call him out here. And as I think our dear listeners might remember on other episodes before this, I said Rook was kind of like, I don't want to say crybaby, but he did seem like he was always running away.
Mm-hmm.
And Pumbaa says the same thing. Flying away is what you want. The birds know that. He reestablishes his connection to the flock. And the smoke starts to clear. They're coming back in. And I really like how there's like several panels where we're just kind of seeing movement, right? Mm-hmm. So he says the smoke clears. He thinks. In a thought square. That's what we're calling them now. The smoke clears, then I see the sky. I see ... And we just get this magnificent panel. Huge. Would you call that?
Yeah, you mean that it's like a panel that takes up the page from top to bottom.
Yeah.
Top to bottom.
I mean, it's really cool. He sees cliff.
And it's a little deceptive, right? Because the momentum, kind of like in Geiger, like this is something Jeff does, right? It's we see it. He's like, show us the way out. It seems like maybe we're leading to a resolution. Then we have all those panels of movement, like you said, and then it's one of those kind of like somebody stopping on a dime on a basketball court, except it's not a resolution. It's not all those things. There's further tension built because he's now at the precipice of a cliff.
I mean, it looks beautiful.
Oh, it's awesome looking, for sure.
I feel like this moment of disbelief for him is why the connection was unstable again. And he's mad. He's like, help me.
It's the commanding font and font color. It's that slightly darker, greenish, bluish color and for when he's communicating with them. And he even says, I try and open myself up to the birds in a way I never have before. And then he recalls building the scarecrow to protect his father, and he considers it a failure because he didn't protect his father. But the birds still came. And this is interesting because it sounds like he's saying he hears them saying these things. We are not cowards. We are Rook. You are Rook. Fly with us.
It's kind of like, we are Rook. I mean, that's a pretty cool line in itself. And then he's still rejecting it. They don't understand. I'm not one of them. I never will be. Well,
he's being literal in this case. He's saying, because they said fly with us.
Oh, okay.
So he's saying he's come this far. He got through it. He was giving them a chance, but they're just saying, come on, you can fly like us. And he's like, they really are just animals. They really don't get that.
I like at the bottom of the panel on that last page, it's just we see, oh no. So we know we're about to get some more Pumbaa.
Yeah, and this is another one of those things where it seems like this Pumbaa is like an ethereal presence because he's just ambling about in the fire. And yeah, I think that there's a Pumbaa that will travel onward with Rook, and then there's the Pumbaa that was in Rook's vision. And I think that we're still witnessing the Pumbaa that was in Rook's vision.
Uh-huh.
And that Pumbaa says humans tend to pass down their baggage.
What if giving up runs in your family? And it almost seems like our little spiritual guiding boar is trying to egg him on. Guess giving up's just in your family. Guess we're both just gonna die on this cliff. Guess I shouldn't have talked at all.
Yeah. And this is why I'm not so... I don't think his father... Man, I don't know. Because he even, as it continues, we get to see the 2 brief panels back to his dad. He says, I know who my father was. He didn't start the fire. And it seems like he's becoming something more in these panels, right? So, but then we see his dad letting the animals out of the barn and saying that he wished he had rain. And so this doesn't mean that he didn't do it, right? Like, he could have done it and saved the animals, and he could have been sad, and the lack of the rain is meant to emphasize that's why he did what he did, or I don't know. I don't love the idea of him having, like, basically convinced himself of something else all this time, and now having to accept the truth, because I don't read this as this way. I feel like this
that makes sense.
More like him, you know, he even says it. My father died fighting to save the farm and every animal on it. No fever dream is going to change my mind about that. Which I like, because it implies, like, yeah, we're on track with this being a little bit of a fever dream.
And I really hope it is a fever dream, just for the pure fact of we're about to see how he does get away from this fire.
They do make this clear that there was a span of time that occurred. He put the helmet on, he sees a vision, fever dream, quote unquote, and comes back. And what triggers the dream to end, and us to transition back to that, is him choosing to go ahead and take, quote unquote, the only way out, which is him to just jump off the cliff to see if he can fly.
And is in this, by the way, do they basically are trying to fly with him, and then when it says "and flight," is that like showing, like, I am a bird?
You know, it's meant to be out there kind of a deal, because as soon as that happens, it jars him back into the moment where he had just put the helmet on. The connection reestablishes.
And then he says, Pumbaa, and then Pumbaa's not talking anymore.
Exactly. We get back to talking about things like Ursa and interference from the wildlife grid, and he just hears this massive thunderstrike.
It's interesting because the last thing when he was thinking about his father, and his father's like, all we need is rain.
Exactly. And now there is the rain, but then the rain is also the thing that cleanses the fire and calms the situation. Pumbaa is no longer communicating. And Rook says, I hear the flock leader. I hear all of them. Because I am one of them, I am Rook, and I will sacrifice everything to save the animals on this burning planet. To me, you know, much like the build-up of is Barney gonna live or not, him being the way he's been, making you feel that he's a crybaby and stuff, is kind of a Jeff Johnsism, because it counterweights this, and he's known for, like, the payoff, and this is like part of the payoff, you know what I mean? Like, this is, the crescendo is peaking, and now we see this. And it's nice because the character is cool. We want to know more about him. We want him to develop, right? And that's not going to happen if he is forever the negative Nancy about crows.
Oh, 100%.
So I think that was great. And it does say next, fight and flight. And then there's this really neat...
The brawl for it all.
Yeah, it's just a little bit of a different tone. It's a little more fun.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It says Ursa versus Rook, the brawl for it all. Issue 6 on sale in October.
I'm super excited about Pumbaa's bio. So Pumbaa was genetically modified. And I believe in here. And this is where I'm super excited because, Nick, do you remember what my animal would be if I was a warden?
An orca.
An orca. The killer whales.
They talk about orcas?
Yes, they say other recorded example include bears, whales, and turtles. So we have seen bears and we have seen turtles. Are we about to see giant whales? Because if we do, I'm going to be so hyped.
Captain Snoggle rides again. It'd be awesome if that happened. That's really funny. I did not catch the whale reference. And that is specifically a thing, though, because it's made me wonder before why his crows weren't big.
Yeah.
And I don't need that answered. I'm okay with it. Like, it could just be mammals that are affected. Well, I guess a bird's a mammal, but or a bird's a bird.
A bird is a mammal. Wait, no.
I mean, they breathe air, but they lay eggs, so I don't know if they're considered.
No, mammals give live birth.
Right. So they're not. They're
No.
birds. Either way.
They're birds.
I doubted that when they were sitting around figuring this
Science.
out. Avians. When they were figuring this out, I doubt they had this conversation. So I mean, but they do kind of point out, like, yeah, some of them are big, some of them aren't.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I like how
Snake is really big.
Snake is really big. I like that they also say in this that Rook and Pumbaa are now fully bonded and without any use of technology. So Pumbaa's on the team.
Well, it also is one more nugget that's like, hey, don't forget, this is a story about those who want to take technology and use it for their own ends, aka Ursula and the bad guy team, and those who want to not abuse nature and protect it, type of thing. Mm-hmm. And that's the other team. Mm-hmm. Which we don't really know what happened to everybody else. There is one other cool detail that I wanted to point out from the bio, which is the last sentence. It says, if you ask Rook, Pumbaa may also be able to talk. So to me, that's pretty clear that, what happened was a vision, as it were.
Super exciting.
So now we have a listener mail. Would you like to read the listener mail?
Yeah. Friend of the show, Eric, wrote in to say, I'm noticing your Instagram videos. You have many graded books. Did you mail these in to CGC yourself? I'm very afraid of my books getting damaged or lost. Also, I've heard it can take months to get the comics back. Is it worth the wait?
So this is a boring question for you because you don't mess around with all this.
I just observe the end result.
Yeah. So what do you, as a person who's never done this, what would you think about putting your super fancy, nice comic books that you love in a box and mailing them to somebody in another state to do this?
Just from observing, this is a little unfair because I've observed you do it. But if I really wanted to get something graded and I wanted to mail it into CGC, I would probably find the most expensive bubble wrap on the planet. But I wouldn't think they would get lost. I think there are pretty safe ways to send the books in.
There totally are. Although I will tell you the number one thing, people do ask me this question a lot, Eric, and other people have asked about some of the things related to it recently, I think because of the signing that was announced. Because you have to mail your books in for that. Mm-hmm. Even though Ghost Machine's going to be there at some point with CGC, you got to mail them. And so to some people that is, some of these books, like One Bent Corner, it changes the value of a book by a lot. Or the cost, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. So for me, when I first started doing it many years ago, I was so paranoid about that. I just waited for CGC once a year to come around to the Cincinnati Comic Con, and I would go there and I would drop like 20 books off or something. And that was like before I got that into it. And that would be what I would get for like that year. And it was pretty fun. But all they're doing is putting them in very safe boxes and stuff, and then they're going to take them all the way back to their office. It's not really any different than you putting it together and mailing it. If that's your aversion, I wouldn't worry about it. If you're super worried about the way you pack this stuff, I've actually bought, like, CGC has these kits, and I think the other company, CBCS, probably does this too. That you can buy, and they'll ship it to you, and it's a box. And then you open it up, and inside is all the stuff to package your, like, up to 10.
It's a box in a box.
Well, no, it's like you use the same...
I've seen it.
Yeah, you use the same box. And so, but all the stuff is inside. They're like, here, like, to your point about bubble wrap, they've got that, but then they're like, and then they even have, like, a link that's like, go to this video, watch this guy, do it this way, and, like, all that kind of stuff. So, at the same time, like, the people... They don't lose your books. Like I've heard that is a thing, but when you're talking about millions and millions and millions of comic books being graded, yeah, somebody's thing got lost in the mail, I'm sure, at some point. But does it take that long? It does, but what you want to do is you want to look like in the details for this exclusive signing, or even when you're just like putting in your order information on their website, it'll tell you the estimated time frame. So, like, this exclusive signing has, like, a 6-week turnaround or something fast, which is because they're actually going to probably be there and then do it. And, like, it makes sense. That's why they arrange it like this. But if you just mail books away It depends on like the tier you pick, the age of the book, whether you're going to have it pressed and cleaned, and all this other stuff that you can do. So just look at that and understand that. Now, in terms of like, is this something where like you should run out and buy some books and somehow you're going to get them graded overnight and make a quick buck? Like, that's not what I do this to do at all. But it certainly does protect your investment in a literal and figurative way, right? Because it's a recognized certification company, and just like CBCS is. I'm not sure about the other ones. I just know that those two are. And it also physically protects the comics significantly. It's thick plastic. You're not going to want to take your Hulk 181 and throw it across the room or anything, but if something falls, like it's a significantly different level of protection than a bag and a board, even if it's in a really nice box. So, it's not for everybody. And if all those things make it less appealing for you, I would say not do it. But I've really enjoyed doing it in a lot of cases. I really enjoy like grabbing the books myself and sending them in to get graded to see if I can A, judge the grade correctly, and B, if I can manage to get the book in the mail in that perfect grade there. Like, to me, it's turned into like a fun thing. But yeah, I know it's a foreign thing because we're comic book people and we want to read our comic books, and you're mailing them away. So if you have any more questions about that, feel free to email us at ghostmachinefans@gmail.com.
I have a solution. 1 to read, 1 to grade.
Yeah. Or you can get your regular covered read and your 1 for 50 or 1 for 100 and grade those. That's really the intention. Like, most people aren't reading those high ratio variants.
Cool.
It's been a deep dive for the record books. Snoggle, do you have anything else for the episode?
Connection unestablished.
Terminated.
Yes, my brain is done.
All right. Well, make sure to check out all of our other content at www.ghostmachinefans.com, where you can find our wiki, our forums, and our Instagram, where we post several times a week. And that's a wrap for us on the Ghost Machine Fans Podcast.